Welcome to Discover Before Sleep channel. Tonight, we step into the shadows to meet a predator that thrives when the world goes dark. A pair of golden eyes is watching. This is evolution's ultimate ghost, a hunter so silent, it can hear a heartbeat under the snow. We're uncovering the hidden secrets of the owl, the true master of the night. But tell me, in a world blinded by light, what can these eyes see that we cannot? To support the channel and ensure the continuation of this content, please don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. If you are ready, let's begin our journey. The sun does not merely set, it surrenders. It slips behind the jagged teeth of the horizon, bleeding gold and violet into the bruised skin of the sky, until the colors themselves dissolve into the heavy, velvet weight of the gloaming. This is the moment when the world holds its breath. In the deep reaches of the ancient forest, the shadows do not just grow, they awaken. They begin as thin, elongated fingers stretching from the roots of the oaks and the hemlocks, reaching out to touch one another, merging until the forest floor is a sea of indigo. There is a profound, rhythmic pulse to this transition, a cooling of the earth that sends a shiver through the leaves. The warmth of the day evaporates, carried away on a rising mist that curls like smoke around the massive, furrowed trunks of trees that have stood for centuries. This is the birth of the night forest, a realm that operates on a different clock, under a different set of laws, and within a spectrum of light that the human eye can barely perceive. To understand the owl, one must first understand this specific quality of darkness. It is not an empty void. It is a dense, crowded architecture of sound, scent, and silver-gray shapes. As the last of the songbirds tuck their heads beneath their wings and the squirrels retreat into the hollows of the wood, the air changes. It becomes heavier, carrying the damp perfume of moss, the sharp tang of pine resin, and the musk of damp soil. The wind, which during the day may have been a chaotic force, settles into a steady, predictable flow, navigating the labyrinth of branches with a soft, mournful sigh. In this transition, the forest becomes a cathedral of silence, but it is a silence that is deceptive. It is a silence composed of 1,000 tiny noises: the scuttle of a beetle over dry bark, the snap of a twig under the weight of a wandering deer, the rustle of a mouse beneath the leaf litter. The night forest is a place of deep memory. Long before the first cities were built, long before the first fires were lit by human hands, the darkness was the dominant state of the world. For millions of years, the planet spent half of its existence in this shadow state, and in that time, life had to decide. Some creatures retreated, hiding in the safety of sleep, waiting for the return of the sun to guide their movements. But others looked into the gloom and saw not a barrier, but an opportunity. They saw a world where the fierce competition of the day was absent, where the blistering heat of the sun was replaced by the cool, liquid embrace of the moon. They saw a world that required a new set of tools, a new way of seeing, a new way of hearing, and most importantly, a new way of moving through the air. In these early primordial woods, the air was thick with the breath of giant ferns and the slow, agonizing growth of massive conifers. The transition from day to night was a slow, agonizing crawl. As the blue light faded into the deep indigo of the blue hour, the forest transformed. The vibrant greens and browns of the daytime world were bleached away, replaced by a monochrome landscape of silver and coal. This loss of color is the first challenge of the night. To survive here, a creature cannot rely on the bright flashes of a butterfly's wing or the red berry on a bush. It must learn to read the textures of gray. It must learn to see the way the moonlight catches the edge of a leaf, or the way a shadow shifts when something moves within it. The trees themselves seem to expand in the dark. Their bark, rough and topographical, becomes a map for those who can feel their way through the gloom. The canopy above becomes a lace of black against the star-strewn sky, a ceiling that traps the warmth of the earth and keeps the forest floor just a few degrees warmer than the open fields beyond. This microclimate is the cradle of nocturnal life. It is here, in the stillness, that the first stirrings of a new kind of predator began to take shape. Not a creature of brute strength or blinding speed, but a creature of patience. A creature that could sit as still as a stone for hours, becoming part of the tree itself, until the moment when the darkness revealed its secrets. As we move deeper into this thicket of time and shadow, we feel the temperature drop. The dew begins to form, tiny diamonds of water clinging to the tips of pine needles, weighing them down ever so slightly. The forest breathes in a slow, heaving rhythm. The exhale of the trees releases oxygen that mingles with the dampness, creating an atmosphere that is thick and visceral. In this world, every vibration matters. The snap of a dried leaf is not just a sound. It is a signal. It is a coordinate in space. The night forest is a world of geometry, where the distance between a branch and the ground is measured not in feet, but in the time it takes for a heartbeat to pass. In the heart of this ancient gloom, the silence is so profound that you can hear the blood rushing in your own ears. But for the inhabitants of this place, the silence is a canvas. It is the background upon which the story of survival is written. To be successful in the night forest is to be a master of the unseen. It is to possess a body that can navigate the tangled maze of branches without a single brush of a feather. A body that can plummet through the air like a falling shadow, landing with the weightlessness of a ghost. The evolution of such a creature was not a sudden burst of lightning, but a slow, agonizingly beautiful process of refinement, a carving away of everything unnecessary until only the essence of the night remained. As the moon climbs higher, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor, we begin to see the shapes of the past. We see the ancestors of the birds we know today, moving tentatively into the twilight. They were pioneers of the dusk, testing the limits of their vision, feeling the cool air beneath their wings for the first time. They were the ones who stayed awake when the rest of the world slept, listening to the secrets that the wind whispers only to the dark. They were the beginning of a lineage that would eventually lead to the most specialized, most mysterious hunters the world has ever known. The darkness is not a wall. It is a doorway, and as we pass through it, leaving the sun-drenched world behind, we enter a story that began nearly 60 million years ago. It is a story of how a small, unremarkable bird began to change, stretching its eyes to catch the faintest glimmer of starlight, softening its feathers to muffle the scream of the wind, and turning its very face into an instrument of sound. The forest floor, covered in a thick carpet of decaying leaves and moss, muffles our footsteps as we follow this trail back through the mists of time, toward the very first ancestors who dared to claim the night as their own. The air grows colder, the trees grow taller, and the silence deepens, preparing us for the long, slow journey into the heart of the owl's history. The shadows here are ancient, and they hold the echoes of wings that have long since turned to dust. But the blueprint of those wings remains, etched into the very soul of the forest. To understand the modern owl, we must look back to these early ghosts, to the transition from the bright, chaotic world of the dinosaurs into the quiet, cooling world that followed. We must see how the night itself became a sculptor, molding the bone and feather of a bird into a masterpiece of biological engineering. The journey starts here, in the cradle of the dark, where the first owl ancestor looked out from a high branch, blinked its wide, dark eyes, and saw a world that no one else could see. The forest waits. The stars shift. The night is no longer a place of fear, but a place of profound, hidden life. And as the first owl ancestor prepares to take its first tentative flight into the gloom, we feel the shift in the air, the subtle pressure of a wing beginning to beat, the sharpening of a gaze, and the slow, deliberate pulse of a predator coming into its own. This is the foundation upon collective memory of the woods, a story written in the language of shadows and the rhythm of the rising moon, leading us toward the dawn of a new kind of life. The transition from the absolute darkness of the primordial forest floor into the light of history is a slow, methodical climb through layers of stone and time. To find the first ancestors of the owl, we must travel back nearly 60 million years, to the Paleocene epoch, a world recovering from the great fire that claimed the giants. The dinosaurs had vanished, leaving behind a scarred but resilient Earth, and in the vacuum they left behind, the survivors began to explore the vacant niches of the planet. Among these survivors were small, inconspicuous birds, creatures that had lived in the shadows of the massive reptiles for eons. Now, with the sky open and the great predators gone, they began to change. They were the pioneers of a new world, a world where the power was no longer held by the largest and most ferocious, but by those who could adapt to the shifting rhythms of the earth. In these ancient, humid forests, the air was heavy with the scent of blossoming magnolias and the damp decay of fallen ferns. The birds of this era were not yet the specialized hunters we recognize today. They were generalists, scurrying through the undergrowth or flitting between low branches, their feathers often colorful and their eyes positioned on the sides of their heads to watch for danger from every angle. But among them, a lineage began to pull away from the crowd. These were the Berowarnes and the Ogygoptics, names given to them by modern science, but in the story of the forest, they were simply the first listeners. They were small, perhaps no larger than a pigeon, with legs that were becoming sturdier and talons that were beginning to curve into hooks. To look at these ancient ancestors is to see the owl in its roughest, most unpolished form. They did not yet possess the broad, flat faces or the specialized flight feathers of their descendants. Instead, they looked more like a bridge between the hawk and the nightjar. Their bodies were lean, designed for bursts of speed rather than the slow, hovering patience of the modern owl. Yet even then, the changes were beginning. The bones of their skulls were shifting, the eye sockets widening to accommodate larger globes that could pull in the fading light of dusk. Evolution is not a sprint. It is a slow, patient sculpture, and these early birds were the raw clay. As the millions of years rolled forward into the Eocene, the planet began to cool, and the vast, sweltering jungles began to give way to more structured woodlands. This change in the environment provided a new stage for the owl's ancestors. The dense canopy provided cover, but the forest floor provided a buffet of early mammals, shrews and small rodents that were also beginning their own evolutionary journey into the dark. It was a race of arms and senses. As the mammals became faster and more elusive, the birds that hunted them had to become more precise. They began to spend more time in the crepuscular hours, the flickering transition of dawn and twilight, where the light is tricky and the shadows move. In this flickering half-light, the ancestors began to diverge. One group, the Protostrigidae, began to develop the hallmarks of the nocturnal predator. Their legs grew longer, and their toes began to shift. In a remarkable feat of biological engineering, one of their toes became reversible, allowing them to grip a branch with 2 toes forward and 2 toes back, or to spread their feet into a wide, X-shaped trap to snatch prey from the grass. This was a turning point. A bird that can grip with such versatility is a bird that has moved from being a scavenger to being a specialist. They were no longer just birds that happened to be awake at night. They were becoming creatures of the hunt. The world they inhabited was a landscape of giants and strange shadows. There were flightless birds the size of horses and mammals with teeth like sabers. But the owl's ancestors survived by finding the space where no one else was looking. They occupied the vertical spaces of the forest, the middle-tier branches where they could look down upon the world. This perspective shifted their biology. To look down effectively, their eyes began to move forward, migrating toward the front of the face. This was a costly trade-off. By moving the eyes forward, they lost the ability to see behind them, but they gained something far more precious: depth perception. For the first time, a bird could judge the exact distance to a moving target in the dim light. They could see the world in 3 dimensions, a vital necessity for a predator that must strike with 100% accuracy in the dark. We can imagine one of these early ancestors perched on a limb of an ancient oak. It is not yet the silent ghost of the modern era. Its wings still make a soft whistling sound as it moves, and its call might be a harsh, reptilian hiss rather than a melodic hoot. But as it sits there, the moon reflecting in its widening pupils, we see the spark of the future. It is learning the art of stillness. In the day, the forest is a place of movement and noise, but the night rewards the motionless. The bird that can sit still for an hour, blending into the bark, is the bird that eats. This stillness became etched into their DNA, a quietude that would eventually define their entire existence. Around 30 million years ago, a new family appeared on the scene: the Titanidae, the ancestors of the modern barn owls. They were elegant, with long legs and heart-shaped faces that were beginning to act as satellite dishes for sound. They were the first to truly master the open spaces between the trees, moving into the edges of the forests and the early grasslands. Their appearance marked a solidification of the owl form. The experimental designs of the previous millions of years were being refined into a sleek, efficient hunter. Shortly after, the strigidae, or the typical owls, the great horned owls, the screech owls, and the wood owls, began their own ascent. The rivalry and diversity of these two families filled the night with a new kind of tension. The forest was no longer a safe haven for the small and the scurrying once the sun went down. The air itself had become a weapon. These ancestors were surviving through some of the most dramatic changes in Earth's history. The rising of mountain ranges, the shifting of continents, and the cooling of the poles. Through it all, the owl's blueprint remained resilient. While other species grew to massive sizes and then vanished when the climate changed, the owl stayed focused on the fundamental tools of the night: vision, hearing, and silence. As the Eocene faded into the Oligocene, the world became a drier, more seasonal place. The evergreen jungles retreated, and deciduous forests, trees that dropped their leaves, became more common. This change was crucial. A forest with no leaves for half the year is a forest where there is nowhere to hide. The ancestors of the owl had to become even more specialized. They developed the mottled, cryptic plumage that we see today, feathers that mimic the texture of lichen, the pattern of bark, and the shadows of twigs. They became invisible. A bird sitting in broad daylight became indistinguishable from a broken branch, a defense mechanism that allowed them to sleep through the dangerous day and emerge only when the world turned gray. This journey from the sun-drenched past to the moonlit present was not a straight line. It was a winding path through extinction events and changing landscapes. But the emotional core of the owl, the solitary sentinel of the night, was forged in these ancient fires. Each feather, each bone, each flicker of instinct was tested by millions of years of survival. They are not merely birds. They are the survivors of a lost world, carrying the secrets of the ancient forests in their very marrow. The wind begins to pick up now, blowing through the needles of the pines, carrying with it the cold promise of the future. The ancient ancestors have done their work. They have laid the foundation. The stage is set, the tools are sharpened, and the forest is ready. As the last of the primordial light fades from the story, we see the owl as it truly is, a creature that did not just inhabit the darkness, but was shaped by it, becoming the living embodiment of the night's own mystery. The transition is complete. The ancestor has become the owl, and the night is no longer a foreign territory, but a home. As the moonlight filters through the canopy, catching the silver sheen of a newly evolved feather, we move from the history of the bone to the history of the spirit. We move from the how of their existence to the why. Why did they leave the sun behind? What was the allure of the shadows that compelled a creature of flight to abandon the blue sky for the velvet black? To answer this, we must look closer at the world they chose. A world of hidden riches and silent dangers, where the rules of life are written in the language of the moon. The shift from a creature of the sun to a monarch of the shadows was not a sudden retreat, but a slow, deliberate migration into a world of untapped potential. To understand why the ancestors of the owl turned their backs on the golden safety of the day, one must look at the daytime sky of 60 million years ago. It was a crowded, violent theater. The air was thick with the wings of soaring hawks, falcons, and early eagles, predators that relied on blinding speed and the harsh, direct glare of the sun to pin their prey. For a smaller, burgeoning lineage of birds, the competition for food was a relentless, exhausting battle. Every mouse that scurried through the grass was chased by a dozen sets of eyes. Every lizard on a rock was a target for 100 different talons. The day was a loud, saturated marketplace where only the fastest and most aggressive could thrive. But as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, a vast, silent empire was left unguarded. As the hawks settled onto their high, sun-warmed perches to sleep, the world below them transformed. This was the nocturnal niche, an ecological vacuum waiting to be filled. The night offered a bounty of life that the daytime hunters could never reach. Thousands of species of rodents, amphibians, and large insects emerged from their burrows only after dark, safe in the knowledge that the great hunters of the sky were blind in the gloom. The owl's ancestors recognized this oversight. They saw that the darkness was not a barrier, but a shield. By moving into the night, they effectively doubled the size of their world. They traded the chaotic, crowded day for a private, silver-hued kingdom where they were the only masters of the air. This transition required a radical reimagining of what it meant to be a bird. In the light of day, color is a primary language. It is used for mating, for warning, and for camouflage. But in the deep woods at midnight, red, blue, and yellow cease to exist. They are luxuries that the night cannot afford. The owl began to shed these vibrant pigments, replacing them with a complex tapestry of cryptic coloration. Their feathers became a study in earth tones, the charcoal of burnt wood, the pale cream of lichen, the deep ochre of decaying leaves. This was the birth of the ultimate camouflage. An owl does not just hide, it dissolves. By day, it becomes a literal extension of the tree trunk, its body mimicking the vertical fissures of the bark so perfectly that a predator could pass within inches and see nothing but an old, weathered branch. But the true allure of the night lay in the physics of the hunt. In the bright light of day, a predator can see its prey from a mile away, but the prey can also see the predator. Hunting becomes a game of raw speed, a high-speed chase where the winner is determined by who can fly faster. In the darkness, the rules change entirely. The hunt becomes a game of information and stealth. To move into the night was to move into a world where hearing became as important as seeing, and where the most dangerous weapon was not a sharp beak, but absolute silence. The owl ancestors began to trade away the heavy, stiff flight feathers of the hawk, which whistle and snap as they cut the air, for a softer, more porous plumage that could swallow sound. The psychological shift was perhaps the most profound. Most birds are hardwired to seek cover when the light fades, driven by an ancient fear of the unknown. The owl had to override this instinct. It had to develop a nervous system that was calm in the face of total darkness. While other birds felt their world shrinking as the shadows grew, the owl felt its world expanding. Its pupils began to dilate to a degree unseen in almost any other avian species, turning its eyes into light-gathering wells. The night became its sanctuary. The coolness of the evening air was less taxing on its metabolism than the heat of the midday sun. The stillness of the wind allowed it to detect the smallest vibration of a beetle's leg. As they moved deeper into this nocturnal life, the owls began to physically change to reflect their new environment. Their necks became more flexible, allowing them to scan the world without moving their bodies and giving away their position. Their metabolism slowed, allowing them to sit for hours in a state of hyperfocused meditation. They became the embodiment of the forest's own patience. The night was no longer a time to wait for the morning. It was the time when life truly began. This was a spectrally different existence. To an owl, the moon is not a distant, cold stone. It is a searchlight that reveals the textures of the world. The stars are not just points of light. They are a map of the heavens. This migration into the dark also changed the way they interacted with one another. In the day, birds communicate with flashes of color and complex, soaring songs. In the night forest, communication had to be different. It had to be low frequency, capable of traveling through dense fog and thick stands of timber without losing its clarity. The owl's voice evolved into the hoot, a sound that is felt as much as it is heard. These deep, resonating calls became the borders of their invisible territories, marking out the geography of the night. By choosing the darkness, the owl entered into a silent pact with the forest. It would keep the populations of the night dwellers in check, preventing the rodents from overwhelming the plant life, and in return, the forest would provide it with the ultimate hunting ground. This was the dawn of the trophic balance of the night. The owl became the apex of a hidden food chain, a ghost that maintained the health of the ecosystem while the rest of the world slept. They became the bio-indicators of the forest. A healthy owl population meant a healthy, vibrant night forest. As we watch an owl today, perched on a branch as the last of the sun's rays vanish, we are seeing a creature that has mastered the greatest challenge of evolution, the conquest of the unknown. It does not fear the dark because it is the dark. Every part of its being is a response to the questions asked by the night. How do you see what is hidden? How do you hear what is silent? How do you move without a sound? The answers are written in the curve of its beak and the softness of its wing. The air is now perfectly still. The crepuscular animals have retreated, and the true denizens of the deep night are beginning to stir. The forest floor is alive with the tiny, rhythmic heartbeats of a million creatures, all of them unaware that a pair of wide, golden eyes is watching from the canopy. The transition is complete. The owl has moved from the history of its ancestors into the reality of its biological perfection. And now, to truly understand how this creature operates, we must look at its most iconic feature, the face that acts as a mirror for the world's hidden sounds. The stillness of the deep night is an illusion. To our human ears, the forest at midnight might seem like a void of silence, a heavy blanket of nothingness. But to the owl, the darkness is a roaring, vibrant landscape of data. As the moon climbs higher, casting its pale, clinical light through the lattice of the canopy, we must look closer at the owl's most striking feature, the round, flat mask that defines its silhouette. This is the facial disc, a masterpiece of biological engineering that serves as much more than a face. It is a biological satellite dish, a sophisticated collector of invisible energy that allows the owl to see with its ears. The facial disc is composed of specialized, stiff feathers known as ruffs. These are not like the soft, downy feathers that cover the rest of its body. They are densely packed with thin shafts and very few barbs, creating a surface that is remarkably efficient at reflecting sound waves. These feathers are arranged in concentric circles, fanning out from the eyes and tapering toward the edges of the face. They create a concave structure, a gentle bowl that catches the faintest vibrations in the air, the high-pitched squeak of a vole, the scratch of a claw on bark, the rustle of a moth's wing, and funnels them directly toward the ear openings hidden just beneath the surface. In the cinematic landscape of the night, the facial disc acts as an acoustic lens. Just as a magnifying glass focuses the rays of the sun into a single, burning point of light, the facial disc focuses the scattered sound waves of the forest into the owl's inner ear. This sound map is so precise that an owl can detect a mouse moving under 2 feet of snow or thick leaf litter, even when the prey is completely invisible to the eye. The disc is not a static structure. The owl can use tiny, delicate muscles in its skin to subtly change the shape of the disc, widening or narrowing the bowl to tune into specific frequencies or directions. It is a living, breathing radar system that is constantly scanning the horizon. Underneath these rough feathers lies the hidden architecture of the ears themselves. Unlike human ears, which are fleshy appendages on the sides of our heads, the owl's ears are large, vertical slits located at the very edge of the facial disc. If you were to part the feathers of a great gray owl, you would find ear openings that are nearly as large as its eyes. These openings are protected by a movable flap of skin called the operculum, which the owl can adjust to control the volume of the sounds it receives. This allows the owl to filter out the white noise of the forest, the rushing of a nearby stream or the constant sighing of the wind, and focus entirely on the high-frequency sounds produced by its prey. This focus is an emotional experience for the bird. When an owl detects a potential meal, its entire posture changes. The facial disc flares, the feathers tightening to catch every possible decibel. The bird becomes a statue of intense concentration. It tilts its head, not out of curiosity, but to triangulate the exact origin of the sound. By shifting the angle of its facial disc, it can compare the time it takes for a sound to reach its left ear versus its right ear. This difference is measured in microseconds, intervals of time so small they are nearly impossible for a human mind to comprehend. Yet, for the owl, these microseconds are the difference between a successful hunt and a night of hunger. The facial disc also serves a secondary, more subtle purpose. It enhances the owl's vision. Because the eyes are fixed forward within the disc, the owl's gaze and its hearing focus are always perfectly aligned. Wherever the owl looks, it is also listening with maximum sensitivity. This synchronization of the senses creates a unified perception of the world. It doesn't just see a mouse. It perceives a sonic signature that matches the visual movement. In the pitch-black darkness where even the most advanced light-gathering eyes might fail, the facial disc ensures that the owl is never truly blind. The evolution of this structure was a long journey of refinement. In the earliest ancestors we discussed, the facial feathers were likely more disorganized, providing only a slight advantage in sound collection. But as the competition in the night grew, the selection pressure favored birds with more symmetrical and efficient discs. Over millions of generations, the feathers became stiffer, the arrangement more precise, and the muscles more responsive. The result is the iconic face of the owl, a shape that has become synonymous with wisdom and mystery, but which is, in reality, a high-tech sensory array designed for the lethal mathematics of the hunt. As the wind moans through the branches of the ancient hemlocks, it carries with it 1,000 stories. To us, it is just wind. But to the owl, the wind is a carrier of information, a medium through which it reads the health and movement of its kingdom. The facial disc catches the air, filtering the chaos into a clear, understandable narrative. The owl sits in the center of this web of sound, a silent conductor of the nocturnal symphony. It knows when a branch is about to break 3 trees away. It knows when a predator is approaching from the shadows. And it knows, with a terrifying certainty, exactly where the smallest heart in the forest is beating. But the facial disc is only half of the story. To truly pin a point in the darkness, to know not just that a sound exists, but exactly where it sits in the three-dimensional grid of the forest, the owl requires a level of symmetry that defies the standard rules of biology. It requires ears that are not made equal. As the moon passes behind a cloud, plunging the woods into an even deeper shade of charcoal, we must look beneath the feathers of the mask to see the strange, lopsided secret that allows the owl to strike with the precision of a lightning bolt. Beneath the velvet surface of the facial disc lies a secret that defies the usual rules of nature's symmetry. In most creatures, the left side is a mirror of the right, a balanced architecture of bone and flesh. But as the owl leans forward on its lichen-covered perch, it reveals a hidden, lopsided genius. If we could peel back the layers of rough feathers, we would find that the owl's ears are not placed at the same level on its skull. In many species, like the barn owl or the great gray, the right ear is positioned higher up, tilted toward the sky, while the left ear sits lower, angled toward the earth. This is the phenomenon of ear asymmetry, a biological masterstroke that turns the owl's head into a high-precision surveying instrument. To understand why this broken symmetry is actually a pinnacle of perfection, we must imagine the forest as a three-dimensional grid of sound. When a human hears a noise, we are fairly good at telling if it comes from the left or the right. The sound hits one ear a fraction of a second before the other, and our brain calculates the horizontal angle. However, we are notoriously poor at determining height. A snap of a twig directly in front of us could be on the ground or in the branches above. Without looking, we often cannot tell. For the owl, this ambiguity would be a death sentence for its hunt. Cannot afford to guess. It must know. Because its ears are placed at different heights, a sound originating from a mouse in the grass will reach the lower left ear and the higher right ear at slightly different times and with different intensities. The higher ear, angled upward, is more sensitive to sounds coming from above or on a level plane, while the lower ear, often tilted slightly downward, catches the subtleties of the forest floor. By comparing these two distinct inputs, the owl's brain performs a feat of instantaneous calculus. It measures the interaural time difference, the microscopic gap in arrival time, and the interaural intensity difference, the difference in loudness. As the owl tilts and rotates its head, a movement that can look ghostly or even comical to a human observer, it is actually scanning the vertical and horizontal axes of its environment. It is looking for the null point, the exact orientation where the sound reaches both ears with a specific calibrated balance. When the owl's head is locked onto its prey, the sound is centered in its sonic field. At that moment, the owl has achieved what scientists call acoustic triangulation. It has pinned a single point in the dark, three-dimensional void. It does not need to see the vole. It has already seen it with a mathematical certainty that no eye could match. This internal processing happens in the midbrain, in a region called the inferior colliculus. Here, the owl possesses a physical map of its auditory space. For every location in the world around it, there is a specific group of neurons that fire. As a mouse moves from left to right, or from the leaf litter onto a fallen log, a corresponding wave of electrical activity travels across this neural map. The owl's brain is, in effect, a living radar screen. It is a world where sound has shape, weight, and position. The emotional weight of this scene is found in the owl's absolute stillness. It does not fidget. It does not pace the branch. It waits, its head turning in slow, mechanical increments, a silent satellite dish searching for a signal. The wind may howl and the trees may groan, but the owl's filter is absolute. It can ignore the low-frequency rumble of a distant storm to catch the high-frequency ticking of a shrew's heartbeat. This specialized hearing is most sensitive to the exact frequencies produced by the rustle of dry leaves and the squeaks of small mammals, the very sounds of its survival. As the moon begins to descend toward the midpoint of the night, the air grows thinner and colder. The sound travels differently now. The dampness of the midnight hour makes the air more conductive, sharpening the edges of every noise. The owl's asymmetrical ears are tuned to this specific atmosphere. It is a creature that has traded the visual clarity of the day for a structural complexity that allows it to dominate the silence. Every tilt of its head is a calculation, every ruffle of its feathers a calibration. But even with this miraculous hearing, the owl is not a creature of sound alone. While the ears provide the coordinates, the eyes provide the confirmation. As we move from the hidden chambers of the owl's skull to the massive, glowing orbs that dominate its face, we transition from the world of acoustics to the world of light. To hunt in a forest where the sun has been absent for hours, the owl requires eyes that are not merely large, but are fundamentally different from any other eyes on the planet. The ears have found the target. Now, the eyes must pierce the veil of the deepest shadow. The transition from the world of sound to the world of light is a descent into the deepest gold and the darkest ink. As the owl locks its head onto the source of the rustle, that pinprick of sound identified by its lopsided ears, its eyes widen, expanding until they seem to consume the very face of the bird. These are not the eyes of a creature that merely lives in the dark. They are the eyes of a creature that has mastered the physics of the photon. To look into an owl's eyes is to look into two vast, tubular light traps, specifically designed to harvest the faintest glimmers of a world that, to us, would be absolute nothingness. If we were to look beneath the feathers and the bone, we would see that an owl's eyes are not spheres like our own. They are shaped more like elongated light bulbs or binoculars, held in place by bony structures called sclerotic rings. Because of this shape, the owl cannot roll its eyes. It cannot look out of the corner of its eye at a passing shadow. Its gaze is fixed, a permanent, forward-facing stare that grants it incredible telescopic power, but requires it to turn its entire head to see the world. This fixity is the price the owl pays for a visual system that is essentially a high-speed camera lens with a massive aperture. In the dimness of the midnight forest, the primary challenge is not detail, but detection. The back of the owl's eye, the retina, is densely packed with specialized cells called rods. These are the soldiers of low-light vision, capable of detecting a single photon of light. While human eyes are rich in cones, the cells that allow us to see the vibrant reds of a sunset or the blue of a jay's wing, the owl has sacrificed color for sensitivity. Its world is a masterpiece of silver, charcoal, and moon white. It sees the forest not as a collection of colors, but as a map of luminance, where the slightest movement of a gray mouse against a dark gray leaf is as obvious as a flash of lightning. Behind this forest of rods lies the owl's secret weapon, the tapetum lucidum. This is a reflective layer of tissue, a biological mirror that sits behind the retina. When light enters the eye, it passes through the rods once. Any light that isn't absorbed by the cells hits this mirror and is bounced back through the rods a second time, giving the eye a double chance to capture the image. This is why, when a stray beam of light catches an owl in the dark, its eyes seem to glow with an eerie, unearthly fire. It is the light of the world being reflected back out, a testament to the efficiency of its internal optics. This incredible light-gathering ability allows the owl to navigate the cluttered environment of the woods with terrifying speed. It can see the individual pine needles that might snag a wing. It can see the subtle curve of a branch that provides a landing spot. It can see the heat haze of a small mammal's breath in the cold air. But vision in the dark is about more than just light. It is about integration time. The owl's brain processes visual information more slowly than a hawk's, allowing it to pool the light over a longer period, much like a long exposure photograph. This turns the flickering shadows into a stable, clear landscape. The emotional intensity of the owl's gaze is a reflection of its focus. When it stares, it is not just looking. It is analyzing. It is measuring the distance between the canopy and the floor with binocular vision that overlaps by 60 to 70 degrees, giving it a depth perception that is far superior to most other birds. This three-dimensional view is critical for the final moments of the hunt. To strike a moving target from 20 feet in the air, in a forest where branches are everywhere, the owl must know exactly where here ends and there begins. As the moon drifts behind a thick bank of clouds, the forest is plunged into a darkness so thick it feels like a physical weight. Even the most sensitive eyes reach their limit. Yet the owl does not flinch. It stands on the precipice of action, its eyes and ears now perfectly synchronized. The auditory map and the visual map have merged into a single, seamless reality. It knows the coordinate. It sees the shadow. But to cross that distance, to move from the branch to the prey without alerting the keen ears of the forest, it needs more than just senses. It needs to become a ghost. The air around the owl is heavy and still, yet we are about to witness a miracle of fluid dynamics. As the bird prepares to launch, every feather on its body is a component in a silent engine. The eyes have done their work. They have pierced the veil. Now the body must follow, moving through the air with a silence so profound it defies the laws of nature. We move from the glowing orbs of the face to the velvet edges of the wing, where the secret of the silent flight is hidden in the very microscopic structure of the down. The stillness of the night is a fragile glass, easily shattered by the smallest vibration. For most birds, flight is a noisy endeavor, a chaotic symphony of snapping quills, whistling wind, and the percussive thwack of feathers beating against the air. A hawk's descent is a rush of sound. A pigeon's takeoff is a frantic clatter. But as the owl leans into the void, preparing to leave its perch, it prepares to perform a feat of physics that seems to defy the very nature of the atmosphere. It is about to move through the air without leaving a footprint of sound. This acoustic stealth is not the result of magic, but of a threefold structural marvel found in the owl's feathers. When we look closely at the leading edge of an owl's wing, the part that first bites into the air, we see a row of stiff, comb-like serrations. In a normal bird, the air hitting the front of the wing creates a large, turbulent wake, much like the bow wave of a ship. This turbulence is what produces the whooshing sound of flight. However, the owl's leading-edge fringe acts as a series of tiny fences, breaking the air into miniature, manageable streams. This process, known as laminar flow, prevents the formation of noisy air vortices before they even begin. As the air travels across the top of the wing, it encounters the second secret, the velvet canopy. While most birds have feathers that feel smooth or oily to the touch, the surface of an owl's wing is covered in a soft, dense pile of microscopic hairs. This downy coating acts as a silencer. It absorbs the high-frequency sounds produced by the feathers rubbing against one another and creates a porous buffer that further dampens the friction of the wind. To the touch, it feels like the finest silk. To the air, it is a sponge that swallows sound. Finally, the air reaches the trailing edge of the wing, the back part where the wind leaves the bird. In other species, this edge is sharp and stiff, causing the air to snap off and create a distinct pop or whistle. In the owl, this edge is feathered with a soft, ragged fringe, like the frayed ends of an old rug. This fringe allows the air to slide off the wing and merge back into the surrounding atmosphere with almost no disturbance. The result is a flight that is virtually undetectable, even to the hypersensitive ears of a rodent. The emotional resonance of this silence cannot be overstated. It is a terrifying advantage. A mouse on the forest floor may have ears designed to catch the faintest rustle, but it cannot hear a predator that makes no sound at all. The owl is a ghost made of muscle and bone. As it spreads its wings, which are exceptionally large and broad compared to its body weight, it gains a massive amount of lift. This allows the owl to fly very slowly, almost hovering, as it scans the ground. It does not need to flap violently. A few deep, rhythmic strokes are enough to carry it through the labyrinth of the trees. The owl's body is a study in low wing loading. Because its wings are so large and its body relatively light, it can glide for long distances without a single wing beat. It moves through the forest like a cloud of smoke, slipping between branches that are only inches apart. Its feathers are not just tools for flight, they are sensors. Every microscopic change in air pressure is felt by the bird, allowing it to adjust its course mid-air with a precision that no airplane could ever achieve. Beneath this suit of silent armor, the owl's muscles are coiled and ready. The primary flight feathers are anchored into the bone with a strength that belies their soft appearance. As the owl glides, it is not merely drifting. It is steering with its tail, its legs tucked tight against its body to maintain a streamlined profile. It is a living blade, cutting through the darkness with a surgical grace. The night air is cold, and the owl's feathers serve a final, vital purpose: insulation. The same downy structure that silences its flight also traps a layer of warm air against its skin, allowing it to remain active even when the temperature drops far below freezing. This thermal efficiency means the owl doesn't have to waste energy keeping warm. Every calorie it consumes can be directed toward the hunt. The moon is now high, and the forest is a theater of expectant silence. The owl has finished its preparations. Its ears have mapped the prey, its eyes have pierced the shadow, and its wings have become the silence itself. The bird shifts its weight, its talons loosening their grip on the bark. In a single, fluid motion, it leans into the gravity of the night. We are no longer watching a bird on a branch. We are witnessing the beginning of the most specialized hunt in the natural world. The air does not part for the owl. It welcomes it. The moment of departure is not a leap. It is a falling. The owl simply ceases to be part of the tree. As gravity pulls its body toward the earth, the broad, velvet-cloaked wings unfurl, catching the thick night air and converting that downward momentum into a silent, horizontal glide. This is the first hunting flight, the transition from the theoretical map of the mind to the physical reality of the kill. The owl moves through the understory, weaving between the skeletal fingers of the birches and the heavy, needle-laden boughs of the firs. It does not fly like a bird of the open sky. It flies like a shadow passing through a mirror, appearing and disappearing as it crosses the paths of moonbeams. The silence is absolute. A human standing 10 feet away would feel nothing but a sudden, inexplicable cooling of the air, a faint displacement of pressure that suggests something massive just passed by. The owl's heart rate, which was steady on the branch, now pulses with a cold, focused rhythm. Its head is locked forward, stabilized by a neck that acts like a sophisticated gimbal, keeping its gaze perfectly level even as its body tilts and banks through the narrow gaps in the timber. Every sense is now funneled into a single point on the forest floor, a patch of dead leaves 40 feet ahead where a deer mouse has made a fatal mistake. The mouse is unaware of the ghost above. It is busy foraging for seeds, its own tiny heart beating rapidly. To the mouse, the night is a place of safety, and the white noise of the breeze in the needles is a comforting shroud. It stops for a second to groom its whiskers, a moment of vulnerability. In that heartbeat of time, the owl has already calculated its trajectory. It is not flying directly at the mouse. It is flying to where the mouse will be in 3 seconds. This is proportional navigation, a complex mathematical adjustment that requires the owl to process its own speed, the wind's drift, and the prey's potential path of escape. As the owl closes the distance, it enters the terminal phase of the hunt. It begins to slow its flight, pulling its wings back and spreading its tail like a fan to create a massive amount of drag. It stalls in mid-air, hovering for a fraction of a second directly above the target. In this moment, the bird's legs, which have been tucked neatly beneath its tail feathers, swing forward. This is a violent, mechanical transition. The owl's thighs are thick with powerful muscles, and its shanks are covered in stiff, protective feathers that shield the skin from the desperate bites of its prey. The talons are the final instruments of the night. As the owl drops the last few feet, it spreads its toes into a wide, lethal X. The back toe, the hallux, is positioned to lock against the 3 forward-facing toes, creating a cage of bone and keratin. The tips of the talons are needles, sharp enough to pierce through fur, skin, and muscle to reach the vital organs in an instant. The owl doesn't just grab. It strikes with a force that can be several times its own body weight, the impact alone often enough to stun or kill the prey before the grip even tightens. We see the strike in slow motion. The explosion of dry leaves as the owl hits the ground, the massive wings mantling over the kill like a dark tent to hide the prize from any other hungry eyes in the wood. This mantling is an ancient, instinctive behavior, a shielding of the food that turns the owl into a hunched, defensive shape. The mouse is gone, vanished into the shadows of the bird's belly. There is no struggle, no sound of a hunt, only the sudden, heavy stillness that follows a successful strike. The owl remains on the ground for a moment, its breath coming in short, sharp bursts. It scans the perimeter, its golden eyes checking for larger predators like foxes or bobcats that might have been drawn to the vibration of the hit. The forest floor, damp and smelling of ancient earth, is the only witness. Then, with a powerful thrust of its legs and a single heavy beat of its wings, the owl rises. It carries the weight of its prize easily, returning to the safety of the higher canopy. The hunt is the center of the owl's existence, the point where all its evolutionary specializations, the ears, the eyes, the feathers, converge into a single, decisive action. But this first flight is only one chapter. The night is long, and the forest hides its inhabitants in many ways. Sometimes the prey is not sitting in the open on a patch of leaves. Sometimes it is hidden deep beneath the winter's crust or the thick decay of autumn. To survive those nights, the owl must rely on a level of acoustic visualization that borders on the impossible. The air is cooling further, and a light frost begins to crystallize on the edges of the leaves. The owl settles back onto a different branch, the taste of the hunt fresh, its mind already resetting for the next signal. As we watch it swallow and ruffle its feathers back into place, we realize that the hunt is not just about killing. It is about the profound connection between the predator and the ecosystem. The owl is the needle that threads the darkness together. And as the wind begins to carry the scent of snow, we prepare to see how the owl hunts when the world itself is hidden under a white, frozen veil. The frost has begun to transform the forest, turning the vibrant indigo of the night into a landscape of brittle silver. In the deep winter, the world changes its frequency. The soft carpet of autumn leaves is replaced by a thick, insulating crust of snow, a frozen desert that hides the life of the forest beneath a white, crystalline ceiling. To a human observer, the woods are dead. But to the owl, the world has simply become layered. Beneath the snow, in the subnivean zone, the rodents have built a hidden city of tunnels. They move through the darkness, safe from the freezing wind and the eyes of the hawk. They believe they are invisible. They believe the silence of the snow is their shield. But snow is not a wall to sound. It is a filter. As a vole scurries through its tunnel 3 feet beneath the surface, its tiny claws scratch against the ice crystals. This sound is faint, a microscopic vibration that travels upward, passing through the air pockets between the snowflakes. To the great gray owl, perched on a frost-covered larch, this sound is as clear as a bell in a valley. The owl does not see the white expanse of the meadow as a blank space. It sees it as an acoustic map, where every scratch and scuttle creates a ripple of data that rises through the cold, thin air. The owl leans forward, its massive facial disc acting as a parabolic microphone. Because the snow absorbs and scatters high-frequency sounds, the owl must listen for the specific thump of a body hitting a tunnel wall or the low-frequency crackle of a rodent chewing on a root. This is the pinnacle of acoustic hunting. The bird cannot see its prey, cannot even see the shape of the ground beneath the drifts. It is hunting a ghost in a white void. It tilts its head, measuring the time lag of the sound between its asymmetrical ears, until the two signals overlap perfectly in its brain. The launch is a slow-motion descent into the freezing mist. The owl does not dive. It parachutes. It spreads its wings wide to maximize drag, descending vertically so that its ears remain perfectly aligned with the source of the sound until the very last second. If the vole moves an inch to the left, the owl feels the shift in the sonic image and adjusts its flight path mid-air. It is a biological guided missile tracking a target through a solid medium. As the owl reaches the surface of the snow, it performs the snow plunge. It pulls its wings back and thrusts its long, feathered legs forward with the force of a piston. It does not land on the snow. It punches through it. The impact is a violent spray of white powder. The owl's legs are long enough to reach through the drifts, its talons spreading wide to cover as much area as possible in the dark tunnel below. For a heart-stopping moment, the bird is buried up to its chest in the frozen earth, its head the only thing visible above the white horizon. Beneath the surface, there is a frantic, muffled struggle. The owl's talons find their mark, guided by the memory of the sound it heard seconds before. This is blind striking, a feat of spatial memory that requires the bird to hold the exact three-dimensional coordinate of the prey in its mind, even after the visual world has disappeared. When the owl pulls itself back out of the snow, it is no longer empty-handed. It rises from the drift, shaking the crystals from its feathers, carrying a prize that was supposedly safe under the Earth's frozen skin. This ability to hunt through barriers defines the owl's role in the winter ecosystem. While other predators starve or migrate, the owl remains, a guardian of the trophic balance. By hunting the subnivean rodents, the owl prevents them from overgrazing the roots of the young trees that will become the forest of the future. The owl is the bridge between the world above the snow and the world beneath it. It is the only creature that can bridge the gap between the silence of the air and the secrets of the earth. The cold is biting now, and the owl's breath hangs in the air like a tiny ghost. It flies back to a sheltered hollow, the snow on its wings quickly evaporating in the dry winter air. As it settles, we begin to see the larger picture. The hunt is not just an act of survival for the individual. It is the engine that drives the health of the entire forest. The owl is a regulator, a silent accountant of the woods who keeps the books of life and death in balance. As we move from the frozen meadows to the complex web of the forest's food chain, we begin to understand that the owl's stomach is a record of the forest's health. To know what an owl eats is to know the secrets of the entire ecosystem. The hunt ends in the belly, but the story continues in the pellet, the mysterious, fur and bone relic that the owl leaves behind, a scientific diary of the night's work. The aftermath of the hunt is a quiet, rhythmic process of consumption that bridges the gap between the life of the prey and the life of the predator. An owl does not eat like a songbird, delicately picking its seeds, nor does it tear its food into neat, manageable strips like a falcon. Instead, it often swallows its prey whole or in large, jagged sections. As the owl settles onto a sturdy branch, the mouse, now a source of vital chemical energy, disappears down the bird's throat. This is the beginning of a unique internal journey, a biological processing plant that allows the owl to survive on the most difficult-to-digest materials in the forest. Because owls lack a crop, the storage pouch in the throat found in many other birds, the food passes directly into the proventriculus, the first part of the stomach. Here, powerful acids begin the work of breaking down the soft tissues, the muscle, and the fat. But the owl's stomach faces a challenge. It cannot digest the calcium-rich bones, the tough fur, the chitinous shells of beetles, or the sharp teeth of its prey. To solve this, the owl's digestive system acts as a sophisticated sorter. The soft, nutritious parts move deeper into the second stomach, the gizzard, while the indigestible trash is compressed into a tight, oval package. Hours after the meal, a strange and ancient ritual occurs. The owl's neck stretches, its eyes half close in a look of intense internal focus, and it coughs up a pellet. To a casual observer, this might look like a waste product, but to a scientist, the owl pellet is a treasure chest. It is a perfect, dehydrated record of the night forest's population. Inside these pellets, the bones are preserved in near-perfect condition, protected by the matted fur of the animal they once belonged to. By studying these relics, we can see the invisible gears of the ecosystem turning. We see the rise and fall of vole populations, the presence of rare shrews, and the health of the insect world. This role as an ecosystem auditor is what makes the owl a keystone species. In a single year, a single family of barn owls can consume thousands of rodents. Without this silent pressure from above, the forest floor would become a chaotic landscape of overpopulation. Rodents would strip the bark from young saplings, preventing the forest from regenerating. They would consume the seeds of the great oaks before they had a chance to sprout. The owl is the check and balance, the invisible hand that keeps the green world from being consumed by the gray. But the owl's diet is a mirror of the environment's diversity. In the deep woods, they are the masters of the mammalian hunt. Near the rivers, some species like the eagle owl or the Pell's fishing owl have adapted to take fish, frogs, and even small crocodiles. In the deserts, they become the regulators of scorpions and lizards. This adaptability is the secret to their global success. They are not just hunters. They are ecological opportunists who can read the menu of any landscape they inhabit. The energy the owl gains from this cycle is more than just fuel for flight. It is the currency of the forest. The nutrients the owl consumes are eventually returned to the soil through its droppings, creating hotspots of fertility beneath its favorite roosting trees. This attracts insects, which attract songbirds, which in turn support the very forest the owl calls home. It is a perfect, closed loop of life, where the death of a single mouse feeds the growth of an entire grove. As the owl finishes its cleaning, ruffling its feathers to reset its silhouette, the night feels a little more balanced. The hunger is gone for now, replaced by a calm, territorial vigilance. The forest is not a random collection of trees and animals. It is a structured society with borders, laws, and communication. Now that the belly is full, the owl must turn its attention to the map. It must define its place in the world, not through the hunt, but through the invisible lines of its territory, the silent borders that keep the peace in the dark. The air remains still, but the owl's posture has shifted from the crouch of a hunter to the upright, regal stance of a landowner. It looks out over the silvered valley, its gaze scanning the edges of its domain. It is time to announce its presence. It is time to speak to the night. The owl's kingdom is not measured in miles, but in the reach of its senses. As it digests the night's first meal, the bird sits taller, its silhouette sharpening against the pale, milk-colored moon. It is no longer just a ghost. It is a sentinel. Beneath the canopy, the forest floor is divided into a complex, invisible patchwork of territories, a hidden geography of property and pride. These are the silent borders, the home ranges where every branch, hollow, and clearing is known with a spatial intimacy that rivals a mapmaker's craft. To the owl, the forest is not a chaotic maze. It is a familiar house where it knows every loose floorboard and every drafty window. A territory is a promise of survival. For a predator that relies on high-stakes precision, knowing the lay of the land is a biological necessity. The owl must know where the mice congregate when the rain falls, which rotting logs host the fattest grubs, and which thickets provide the best concealment from the prying eyes of crows during the day. This knowledge is not innate. It is earned through thousands of hours of patrolling. An owl in its own territory is a far more efficient hunter than a wanderer. It knows the exact distance between its favorite perch and the clearing below. It knows the wind tunnels where the air lifts its wings without effort. These borders are maintained not through physical fences, but through a language of presence. The owl marks its domain with its body and its voice. Sometimes it leaves visual post-it notes, the white splashes of mute on a specific branch or the discarded pellets at the base of a roost. To another owl, these are clear signals. This place is occupied. But the primary tool for border control is the hoot. These low-frequency calls are the radio towers of the forest. Because low sounds travel further through dense wood without being absorbed by leaves, a single hoot can carry for miles, informing every other owl in the valley that the borders are patrolled and the landlord is home. The emotional tone of this territoriality is one of grim determination. There is a limited amount of energy in the forest, a finite number of lives to be taken to sustain another. If a second owl, an intruder, enters the space, the tension in the air becomes electric. The resident owl does not usually rush to a bloody battle. Instead, there is a ritual of escalation. First, the warning calls: deeper, faster, more aggressive. Then, a visual display. The owl will puff out its feathers, spreading its wings to double its perceived size, turning its face into a massive, terrifying mask. It sways from side to side, a rhythmic dance of intimidation designed to say, "I am large, I am strong, and I have much to lose." Most disputes are settled here, in the theater of the mind. The intruder, realizing the resident has the home field advantage and the will to fight, will usually slip away back into the neutral shadows. To fight is to risk a broken wing or a blinded eye, and in the night forest, an injury is a slow death sentence. Thus, the silent borders are maintained through a mutual understanding of risk. This spacing is vital for the health of the entire species. It ensures that the owls are spread out evenly across the landscape, preventing any one area from being overhunted and ensuring that there is enough food for everyone to raise the next generation. As the night deepens, the owl begins its border patrol. It moves from one singing post to another, landing on the high points of its territory to broadcast its presence. This is a rhythmic, almost meditative process. The bird is not hunting now, it is communicating. It is part of a larger, invisible network of owls, each one sitting on its own high branch, each one calling out to the darkness. Together, they create a grid of sound that defines the forest's social structure. But even within these borders, the owl is not entirely alone. As it reaches the edge of a meadow, it might hear the call of a neighbor, a familiar voice it has heard for years. This is the dear enemy effect. Established neighbors often tolerate each other more than they do a stranger, having already negotiated their boundaries. They exist in a state of armed peace, a stable equilibrium that allows them both to focus on the more pressing matters of the season. The wind shifts, carrying a new scent, the faint, musky perfume of another owl. But this time, the message is different. It is not a challenge, nor is it a warning. As the season of ice begins to soften into the first hints of a distant spring, the territorial hoots begin to take on a new color. The boundaries of the map are still important, but a new need is rising. The solitary sentinel is beginning to look for something more than just a meal or a branch. The silence of the night is about to be filled with the complex, haunting music of the heart. The transition from the warning of arrival to the invitation of a mate is a subtle shift in the forest's frequency. In the deep, cold heart of the winter night, the owl's voice changes. It is no longer a sharp, percussive bark intended to repel. It becomes a resonant, rhythmic pulse that vibrates through the very wood of the trees. This is the beginning of communication in the dark, a language that relies not on the fleeting visual cues of the day, but on the enduring physics of sound. To live in a world where you are often invisible even to your own kind, you must possess a voice that can penetrate the fog, the snow, and the dense, sound-absorbing needles of the pine. The owl's call is a marvel of low-frequency acoustics. While songbirds use high-pitched, complex trills that are easily scattered by the wind or blocked by leaves, the owl utilizes the deep end of the sonic spectrum. These low notes have long wavelengths that can wrap around obstacles and travel for kilometers with minimal loss of energy. When a great horned owl lets out its iconic 5-note sequence, it isn't just making a noise. It is sending a signal that vibrates the air like a heavy drum. This frequency is perfectly tuned to the acoustic window of the forest, the specific range of sound that the environment allows to pass through most freely. But the hoot is not a generic sound. It is as individual as a human thumbprint. Each owl has a unique voice defined by the length of its neck, the shape of its syrinx, the avian vocal organ, and the resonance of its chest. Through these subtle variations in pitch, timing, and cadence, owls can recognize one another as individuals. A male can tell his mate from a stranger from a mile away. A resident can distinguish between the familiar hoot of a long-term neighbor and the erratic, unsure call of a young floater looking for a home. This recognition is the glue that holds the social structure of the night together, allowing for a complex society to exist in a landscape where the members rarely see each other's faces. The emotional range of owl communication is surprisingly vast. Beyond the standard territorial hoot, there is a vocabulary of screams, whistles, barks, and bill clapping. When an owl is agitated, it will snap its beak together with a sound like a dry branch breaking, a mechanical warning that requires no air from the lungs. During the approach of a mate, the calls soften into hoots and chitters, a conversational murmur that reinforces the pair bond. This is the language of intimacy, whispered in the shadow of a hollow log, a stark contrast to the booming announcements of the border patrol. As the moon hangs like a cold lantern above the valley, the forest becomes a web of these conversations. One owl calls from the north, and a moment later, a response rises from the dark timber to the south. It is a duet, a synchronized exchange where the male and female overlap their voices in a precise, rhythmic pattern. This duetting serves a dual purpose. It tells the rest of the forest that this territory is held by a strong, united pair, and it strengthens the emotional connection between the birds. In the pitch black, this vocal coordination is how they touch one another across the distance. The owl's hearing is, of course, the partner to its voice. It listens not just for the message, but for the reverberation, the way the sound bounces off the landscape. By listening to how its own call echoes through the trees, an owl can actually gauge the density of the forest and the moisture in the air. The voice is a tool for sonar as much as it is for social signaling. It is a constant calibration of the bird's place in the world. Now, as the winter begins to lose its grip and the first thaws turn the forest floor into a mosaic of mud and remaining snow, the nature of these calls changes once more. The territorial disputes have been settled. The neighbors are known. The focus of the night shifts from the map to the mate. The male begins to call with a new kind of urgency, a repetitive, tireless song that carries the weight of the coming spring. He is no longer just defending a space. He is calling a partner to the center of his world. The air is softening, carrying the scent of damp bark and the promise of renewal. The solitary sentinel is ready to share its shadow. We move from the distant, booming calls of the borders to the close, intricate dance of courtship, a ritual of moonlight, offerings, and the slow, graceful building of a life together in the heart of the ancient wood. The transition from the booming declarations of ownership to the tender architecture of a partnership begins with a shift in light and motion. As the frost retreats, leaving the forest floor a damp, silver-black sponge, the male owl changes his strategy. He no longer sits on the high, exposed singing posts to shout at the horizon. Instead, he descends into the mid-canopy, moving with a deliberate, rhythmic grace. This is the stage of courtship, a slow-motion ballet performed in the strobe light flicker of moonbeams filtering through the swaying branches. It is a time of high emotional stakes, where the solitary hunter must transform into a provider and a partner. The first move in this lunar dance is the advertisement flight. The male takes to the air, but his movements are different from the low, stealthy glides of a hunt. He performs exaggerated wing claps and undulating loops, showing off the strength of his wings and the depth of his stamina. These flights are often accompanied by a soft, repetitive whistle hoot, a sound designed to draw the female's gaze without alerting every predator in the valley. He is demonstrating his fitness, the biological proof that he has survived the winter, defended a territory, and possesses the energy to spare for the demanding work of raising a family. When the female finally responds, appearing as a silent, larger shadow on a nearby limb, the courtship enters its most critical phase, the nuptial gift. In the world of owls, love is measured in calories. The male must prove his worth as a provider. He disappears into the dark, and when he returns, he carries a prize. A vole, a large moth, or a beetle. He does not eat it. He approaches the female with a series of rhythmic head bows, offering the meal with a soft, chattering sound. This courtship feeding is a profound ritual. It is a chemical and emotional contract. By accepting the food, the female is not just taking a meal. She is assessing his hunting prowess. If he can provide for her now while she is still free to hunt, she can trust that he will provide for her and the chicks when she is trapped in the nest. This period of mutual preening follows, a rare moment of physical contact for a creature that spends most of its life alone. The two birds sit close together, using their sharp beaks with incredible gentleness to nibble at the feathers of each other's facial discs and necks. This serves a practical purpose, removing parasites from places the birds cannot reach themselves. But its primary function is social. It lowers the natural aggression of the predator, replacing the fight or flight instinct with a pair bond signal. They become a single unit, their heartbeats synchronizing in the quiet of the midnight woods. The courtship is not a single night's event. It is a weeks-long negotiation. They spend hours together, inspecting potential nesting sites. The male will fly to a hollow in an old sycamore or a platform of sticks left by a hawk, calling to the female with an inviting, low-pitched trill. He will step inside the cavity, scratching at the wood dust, demonstrating the safety and comfort of the space. The choice of the nest is the female's ultimate decision. She looks for security from the wind, protection from climbing predators like martens or raccoons, and a vantage point that allows for a quick escape. As the pair bond solidifies, their duets become more complex. They no longer just call back and forth. They overlap their voices so perfectly that to a distant listener, they sound like a single, multi-tonal instrument. This vocal braiding is the final seal of their partnership. They have mapped their territory, they have tested each other's strength, and they have chosen their home. The forest, once a landscape of rivals, is now a sanctuary for two. The air is heavy with the scent of waking earth and the musk of the bird's own feathers. The courtship has reached its peak, and the transition from the dance to the duty is near. The male's hunting will now double in intensity, and the female's body will begin the remarkable process of diverting all her energy into the creation of life. As the moon wanes, casting a dim, protective shadow over the chosen hollow, the focus shifts from the beauty of the bond to the fragility of the beginning. We move from the courtship in the branches to the secret, warm interior of the nest, where the first eggs, perfect, white orbs of potential, are about to meet the world. The transition from the fluid, rhythmic dance of the branches to the static, heavy duty of the nest is a journey into the heart of the tree itself. As the first true warmth of spring begins to stir the sap in the veins of the forest, the female owl retreats. She leaves the silver expanses of the night and pulls the darkness around her like a cloak, settling into the hidden hollow she and her mate have chosen. This is the era of fragile beginnings, a time when the fierce predator becomes a vessel of life, and the wide world of the hunt shrinks to the dimensions of a single wooden chamber. Owls are not builders in the traditional sense. Unlike the industrious weaver birds or the meticulous swallows, owls do not weave grasses or gather mud. They are the great inheritors of the forest. They take what the world provides: a deep cavity carved out by a pileated woodpecker, the rotted-out heart of an ancient beech, or the abandoned stick nest of a hawk or a crow. Some, like the burrowing owl, even descend into the earth, claiming the tunnels of tortoises or ground squirrels. This lack of nest building is a reflection of their philosophy. They are masters of adaptation, finding the negative space in the environment and making it their own. Inside the hollow, the air is still and smells of dry wood, old bark, and the faint, dusty scent of feathers. There is no soft lining of down or moss. The female lays her eggs directly onto the debris of the cavity, the wood chips, the remains of old pellets, and the dust of decades. The eggs themselves are masterpieces of understated design. They are not speckled or camouflaged like the eggs of ground-nesting birds. Because they are hidden in the dark, they are a pure, brilliant white. They are often surprisingly round, shaped more like golf balls than the tapered ovals of a songbird. This shape is a marvel of geometry, providing the maximum internal volume with the minimum surface area, keeping the developing life warm and protected within a sturdy, calcium-clad vault. The laying of the eggs is a slow, staggered process known as asynchronous hatching. The female does not lay her entire clutch at once. Instead, she lays one egg, then waits 2 or 3 days before laying the next. This creates a ladder of life within the nest. It is a brutal but brilliant evolutionary insurance policy. By starting the incubation as soon as the first egg is laid, The owl ensures that the first chick will be much larger and stronger than the last. If food is plentiful, all will survive. If the forest is lean and the hunt is poor, the older, stronger chicks will thrive, ensuring that at least some of the lineage continues, even at the expense of their smaller siblings. The emotional weight of this scene is found in the female's absolute commitment. Once the first egg is laid, she does not leave. She becomes a living furnace. She develops a brood patch, a featherless area on her breast where the skin becomes thick with blood vessels. She presses this warm, pulsating skin directly against the cool shells, transferring the heat of her own blood into the growing embryos. For the next 30 days, her world is a circle of white stone. She depends entirely on the male. Outside, the male's life has become a relentless marathon. He is no longer hunting for himself. He is the lifeline for the entire future of his kind. He must hunt with a frantic, focused intensity, bringing meal after meal to the lip of the hollow. He arrives in silence, a shadow delivering a gift, passing the prey to the female with a soft, encouraging chuckle. He does not stay to linger. The forest is calling, and the hunger of the nest is a bottomless well. He has become a ghost of pure utility, a provider whose only reward is the survival of the hidden treasures within the tree. As the weeks pass, a transformation occurs within the eggs. What began as a simple yolk and a microscopic spark of intent becomes a complex architecture of bone, beak, and brain. The chicks begin to grow egg teeth, tiny, sharp protrusions on the tips of their beaks. From inside the shell, they begin to make soft, peeping sounds, communicating with their mother before they have even seen the light. They are clicking against the inner wall, a rhythmic tapping that signals their readiness to break through the calcium barrier. The atmosphere in the nest is one of breathless anticipation. The female shifts her weight, her golden eyes fixed on the white orbs beneath her. She can feel the vibrations of the life within. The first cracks begin to spiderweb across the surface of the oldest egg. The pipping has begun. The transition from the egg to the chick is the most dangerous moment in an owl's life. A struggle for breath, a fight to escape the cradle that has become a cage. The air in the forest is cooling as the sun sets on another day, but inside the hollow, the temperature is rising. The first chick is about to emerge, a wet, bedraggled creature of the dark, signaling the start of a new chapter in the story of the night. We move from the stillness of the egg to the chaotic, demanding reality of the growing brood, where the silence of the nest is replaced by the first, hungry cries of the next generation. The transition from the silent, white geometry of the egg to the pulsing, chaotic reality of the hatchling is a messy miracle. The first chick emerges not as a majestic predator, but as a sodden, trembling scrap of life, its skin pink and translucent, covered in a sparse coat of white, per top till down. This firstborn, the product of the first egg laid, holds a massive biological advantage. Because of the owl's strategy of asynchronous hatching, this chick has a head start of several days over its younger siblings. It is a world of vertical hierarchy. By the time the last egg pips, the firstborn is already a robust, demanding presence, its eyes beginning to slit open, its neck strong enough to crane toward the light of the hollow's entrance. The environment of the nest changes instantly from a sanctuary of patience to a factory of growth. The female's role shifts from an incubator to a brooder and a processor. The male delivers the prey, perhaps a meadow vole or a large beetle, to the edge of the cavity, but the chicks are not yet capable of eating whole animals. The mother must delicately tear the meat into tiny, blood-rich ribbons, feeding each chick with a gentleness that contrasts sharply with her lethal nature. She listens for their food calls, a series of high-pitched chirps that signal their hunger levels. In the dark of the hollow, these sounds are the only currency that matters. As the days turn into weeks, the transformation is staggering. The chicks undergo a metabolic explosion. Their bodies are designed to convert every ounce of protein into bone and feather at a rate that seems to defy physics. The thin, white down is replaced by a second, much thicker layer of gray, woolly feathers called mesoptile down. At this stage, they look like animated dust bunnies or strange, prehistoric gargoyles. Their heads appear far too large for their bodies, and their eyes, now fully open, are vast, dark pools that seem to soak up the very shadows of the nest. This is the period of sensory awakening. Inside the hollow, the chicks are beginning to map the world beyond the wood. They practice the owl sway, tilting their heads from side to side and even upside down. This isn't play. It is the calibration of their internal GPS. They are learning to use their developing asymmetrical ears to track the sound of their father's wings as he approaches the tree. They are learning to judge the distance to the entrance of the hollow. The nest is their laboratory, a safe space where they can test the limits of their biology before the forest demands perfection. The social life within the nest is a complex web of competition and cooperation. In years of plenty, the older siblings may actually help keep the younger ones warm, huddling together in a soft, vibrating mass of gray fluff. But the shadow of siblicide is always present. If the male fails to bring enough food, the hierarchy becomes a tool of survival. The largest chick will consume the lion's share of the resources, ensuring that at least one strong individual survives to carry on the lineage, rather than 3 weak ones failing together. It is the cold, beautiful logic of the night forest, where the individual is sacrificed for the endurance of the species. As their flight feathers, the remiges, begin to push through the skin in waxy sheaths, the chicks become increasingly restless. They move to the edge of the hollow, staring out at the vast, moonlit world they have only known through sound. They feel the movement of the wind for the first time, a sensation that triggers an ancient, deep-seated instinct. They begin to vigorously flap their wings, strengthening the pectoral muscles that will soon have to carry them into the void. The nest is no longer a world. It is a cage. The emotional tone of the forest is heightening. The parents are exhausted, their feathers tattered from the relentless pace of the hunt. The female now spends more time outside the nest, perched on a nearby branch, encouraging the chicks to come to her. She is no longer bringing the food all the way into the hollow. She is teaching them the first lesson of the wild. If you want to eat, you must move. The air is fragrant with the full bloom of spring, and the nights are growing shorter. The time of the brancher, the stage where the young owls leave the safety of the hole to explore the nearby limbs, is almost here. We move from the cramped, dusty safety of the interior to the terrifying, open heights of the canopy. The story of the chick is ending, and the story of the flyer is about to begin. The first leap is not far away, a moment of gravity and grace that will define whether they belong to the earth or the sky. The transition from the womb of the wood to the expanse of the air is a clumsy, terrifying rite of passage. No longer mere hatchlings, the young owls have reached the branching stage. They are a patchwork of textures. Messy remnants of gray down still cling to their heads like old cobwebs, while the sleek, sturdy feathers of adulthood have begun to armor their wings and tails. Driven by an insatiable hunger and a burgeoning curiosity, the oldest chick inches toward the precipice of the hollow. For its entire life, the world has been a vertical shaft of darkness and the smell of dry rot. Now, for the first time, it feels the true, unfiltered breath of the night. A cold, rushing current of air that tugs at its new feathers, whispering of a world without walls. The first step is not a flight, but a scramble. The young owl uses its beak as a third hand, hooking it into the bark and pulling its heavy, uncoordinated body onto the porch of the nest tree. Its talons, though sharp, are still learning the geometry of a curved branch. It wobbles, its wings flapping in a frantic, asymmetrical rhythm to maintain its balance. This is the moment of greatest vulnerability. To the foxes and martens watching from below, a branching owl is a heavy fruit, ripe and nearly ready to fall. The mother owl watches from a nearby hemlock, her hoot low and encouraging, yet she does not intervene. The lesson of gravity must be learned alone. Throughout the night, the young owls practice the art of pedestrianism, moving through the canopy by leaping from one branch to another. They are testing the tension of the wood and the strength of their own legs. The forest floor is a long way down, a shadow-filled abyss that represents the ultimate failure. To stay high is to stay alive. They begin to perform wing-flapping bouts, gripping a branch with all their might and beating their wings until they are nearly lifted off their feet. This is isometric training, building the massive pectoral muscles required to power the silent flight of their ancestors. Then comes the inevitable moment of the first true leap. It is rarely a graceful affair. The young owl spots its mother on a branch 6 feet away, holding the silvered remains of a vole. The hunger overrides the fear. The bird leans forward, its gaze locked on the prize, and it lets go. For a heartbeat, it is a stone. Then, the instinct millions of years in the making takes over. The wings snap open. They do not produce the silent, ghostly glide of the adult. Instead, they produce a frantic, loud flap, flap, flap as the bird fights to convert its fall into forward motion. It hits the target branch not with a landing, but with a collision, tumbling forward and hanging upside down by its talons, wings splayed before awkwardly righting itself. Failure is a frequent companion in these early hours. Some leaps end in the mantling of a lower bush. Some end in a humiliating slide down a trunk. But with every tumble, the bird's brain is recording data. It is learning the stall speed of its own body. It is learning how to flare its tail to act as a brake. Most importantly, it is learning the tactile map of its environment. The young owl begins to understand that the air is not empty. It is a medium that can be pushed, leaned against, and mastered. As the sun begins to hint at the horizon, the exhausted flyers retreat to the thickest cover they can find. They are learning the second great lesson of their kind, the art of disappearing. They pull their feathers tight, becoming thin and vertical, mimicking the knots in the wood. Their cryptic plumage, once a mess of gray fluff, is now a sophisticated camouflage of streaks and bars that blend perfectly with the lichen-covered bark. They have survived their first night in the open, but the journey to becoming a hunter is only just beginning. The emotional tone of the forest shifts from the frantic energy of the first flight to a quiet, weary pride. The parents have successfully brought their lineage to the edge of independence. But flight is only the vehicle. The mind is the pilot. As the young owls rest, their brains are processing the vast new landscape they have just entered. We move from the physical mechanics of the wing to the internal landscape of the mind, a world of memory, spatial intelligence, and the mysterious wisdom that allows an owl to navigate 1,000 acres of darkness without ever losing its way. The transition from the clumsy, physical struggle of the wing to the quiet, calculating depths of the mind is a journey into the owl's most hidden sanctuary. As the young owl sits motionless on a high cedar limb, it is no longer merely reacting to hunger or gravity. Its massive, forward-facing eyes are not just light catchers. They are the windows to a sophisticated processing center that must decode a world of infinite complexity. To the casual observer, the owl's legendary wisdom is a myth born of its stoic appearance. But to the scientist, the owl's intelligence is a specialized, razor-sharp instrument of spatial memory and problem-solving that allows it to rule a kingdom of shadows. An owl's brain is not like the creative, vocal brain of a parrot or the social, tool-using brain of a crow. It is a brain built for the geometry of the hunt. The most developed parts of the owl's mind are the optic lobes and the hyperpallium, the avian equivalent of a cerebral cortex. These areas are dedicated to creating a living map of the forest. While a human might remember a forest as a series of visual landmarks, the big rock, the fallen oak, the owl remembers it as a three-dimensional grid of distances and sounds. This is spatial intelligence at its peak. The owl can recall the exact location of a dozen different hunting perches, the flight paths that offer the quietest approach, and the specific areas where prey is most likely to emerge during a specific moon phase. This intelligence is rooted in an extraordinary capacity for memory. Experiments have shown that owls can remember the location of a sound source with millimetric precision even after the sound has ceased. This acoustic memory allows them to strike at a target they can no longer hear or see, relying entirely on the mental coordinate they recorded seconds earlier. But their memory goes deeper than the immediate hunt. They are long-term mappers. An owl that has lived in a territory for several years knows the seasonal shifts of the wood, where the snow melts first, where the spring rains create temporary pools that attract frogs, and where the summer heat drives the rodents into the deeper shade. They do not just inhabit the forest, they contain it within their minds. The emotional tone of this intelligence is one of hyperfocus. The owl possesses a cognitive filter that is perhaps the most efficient in the animal kingdom. In a forest filled with the rustle of billions of leaves and the calls of 1,000 insects, the owl can decide which single data point matters. It can ignore the noise of the environment to focus on a signal that is barely at the threshold of detection. This isn't just a sensory feat, it's a mental one. It requires the bird to hold a search image in its mind, a mental blueprint of what a mouse sounds like or what a vole looks like in the dark, and scan the environment until the reality matches the image. We also see the owl's problem-solving skills in its opportunistic hunting. While they are creatures of habit, they are not slaves to it. If a new source of food appears, such as a hatch of moths around a specific tree or a concentration of mice near a human barn, the owl can quickly assess the new pattern and adjust its behavior. They have been observed using luring techniques, occasionally dropping bits of material to see if it triggers a movement from a hidden rodent. This shows a level of predictive modeling, the ability to imagine how another creature will react to a stimulus. As the young owl navigates its first independent weeks, its brain is in a state of neuroplasticity, rapidly forming new connections as it learns the specific quirks of its home range. It is learning the social intelligence of its kind as well, interpreting the subtle variations in the hoots of neighbors to determine who is a threat and who is a known entity. This mental development is the final bridge to adulthood. A bird can have the sharpest talons and the fastest wings, but without the spatial map and the cognitive filter, it will not survive the winter. The moon is now a thin silver sliver, casting long, distorted shadows that play tricks on the eyes. But the owl is not fooled. It sees through the illusions of light because it relies on the certainty of its mental map. It knows where the branch is, even if it is currently in shadow. It knows where the ground is, even if the fog has rolled in. This internal world is a place of profound, quiet order. As we move from the internal architecture of the mind to the vast external diversity of the planet, we begin to see how this intelligence has allowed the owl to conquer almost every corner of the earth. The owl blueprint, the combination of silent flight, acute senses, and spatial memory, has been adapted to the freezing tundras, the blistering deserts, and the tropical jungles. The mind of the owl is the key that has unlocked the entire world. We leave the single tree in the temperate wood to follow the spread of these silent wings across the continents, seeing how the same wisdom takes on 1,000 different forms to survive in 1,000 different nights. The transition from the specific, ancient oak in the heart of a temperate wood to the global tapestry of the night is a journey across borders, climates, and continents. The owl is not a singular creature, but a versatile lineage that has fractured into over 200 distinct species, each one a specialized response to a different environment. While the fundamental owlness, the silent wings, the forward-facing eyes, and the acute hearing remains constant, the physical manifestation of these traits has been sculpted by the hammer of local necessity. From the steaming, emerald canopies of the Amazon to the sun-scorched dunes of the Sahara, the owl has proven to be one of nature's most successful survivors, a ghost that can adapt to almost any theater of the night. In the humid, vertical world of the tropical rainforest, the owl has become a master of the clutter. Here, the air is thick with moisture and the sound of a million competing insects. Large wings would be a liability in the dense tangle of vines and lianas. Thus, species like the screech owls and the spectacled owls have developed shorter, more rounded wings that allow for incredible maneuverability, the avian equivalent of a high-performance sports car in a crowded city. Their voices, too, have adapted. Instead of long-distance hoots that would be swallowed by the heavy vegetation, they often use trills, whistles, or even screams that can pierce through the dense green walls of the jungle. Contrast this with the wide-open, arid expanses of the desert. Here, the challenge is not clutter, but heat and the lack of cover. The elf owl, the smallest owl in the world, barely larger than a sparrow, has found sanctuary within the very heart of the desert's most iconic plant, the saguaro cactus. By nesting in holes carved out by woodpeckers, these tiny predators stay cool during the blistering day, emerging only when the desert air drops in temperature. Their biology is a miracle of water conservation. They obtain almost all the moisture they need from the bodies of the scorpions and crickets they hunt. They are a testament to the fact that the owl's blueprint can be shrunk down to a pocket-sized marvel without losing its lethality. In the southern hemisphere, on isolated islands, the owl has taken even stranger forms. Evolution in isolation often leads to island gigantism or unique behavioral shifts. On some islands, owls have become the dominant terrestrial predator, occasionally spending more time on the ground than in the air. The laughing owl of New Zealand, now sadly lost to history, was a creature that occupied the niche of a small dog, scurrying through the underbrush. In the Caribbean, the burrowing owls have perfected a life of subterranean living, using their long, unfeathered legs to sprint across the sand and retreat into tunnels to escape the midday sun. The eagle owls represent the other end of the spectrum, the giants of the family. With wingspans that can exceed 6 feet and talons capable of crushing the skull of a fox or a small deer, these are the apex predators of the night. Found across Eurasia and Africa, they are the emperors of the cliffs and the old-growth forests. Their presence defines the health of the entire landscape. To see an Eurasian eagle owl perched on a jagged limestone crag as the moon rises is to see a creature that has no natural enemies, a bird that has refined the art of the hunt until it is the undisputed master of its domain. Yet, even within this incredible diversity, there are patterns that connect them all. Whether it is the fishing owls of Africa, which have lost the silent flight feathers because fish cannot hear through the air-water barrier, or the tiny owlets of the Asian forests, they all share the same nocturnal philosophy. They all rely on the element of surprise. They all possess a nervous system that is calm in the face of the unknown. And they all serve as the regulators of their specific ecosystems, keeping the populations of their prey in check and ensuring that no single species dominates the world. The air is changing now, growing thinner and sharper. As we move north, away from the sweltering jungles and the dusty deserts, the landscape begins to flatten out. The trees grow stunted and eventually disappear altogether, replaced by a vast, rolling carpet of moss and lichen. This is the realm of the extreme, a place where the night can last for months and the wind can freeze the breath in your lungs. Here, the owl has undergone its most dramatic transformation, shedding the colors of the earth to become a creature of the ice. We move from the colorful diversity of the global family to the stark, white majesty of the Arctic. The transition is cold and breathtaking, leading us toward a bird that has abandoned the cover of the forest for the open horizon of the tundra. The snow owl awaits, a sentinel of the frost that carries the story of survival into the coldest reaches of the planet. The transition from the world of tangled branches and leafy shadows to the vast, open plains of the Arctic is a journey into the heart of white. Here, the very definition of the night changes. In the high latitudes of the tundra, the sun may not set for months during the summer, and it may not rise for months during the winter. This extreme environment has sculpted the snowy owl, a creature that has abandoned the charcoal and ochre of the forest for a plumage that reflects the purity of the ice. It is a bird of the open horizon, a sentinel of the frost that stands as a bridge between the land and the sky in a world where there is nowhere to hide. The snowy owl's appearance is a masterpiece of thermal engineering. To survive in temperatures that can plummet to 40 degrees below zero, the bird is encased in a dense, multi-layered suit of feathers that is heavier than those of any other owl. Even its legs and toes are covered in thick, white down, giving it the appearance of wearing furry boots. This insulation allows the bird to maintain a body temperature of nearly 104 degrees Fahrenheit 40 degrees Celsius while the wind outside howls across the treeless barrens. Their color is not just for camouflage against the snow. The white feathers are hollow and lack pigment, which creates more air pockets for trapping heat, making the bird a living thermos in the Arctic desert. Because there are no trees in the tundra, the snowy owl has had to reinvent the high ground. It perches on hummocks of moss, jagged rocks, or the occasional piece of driftwood. This ground-dwelling life has shifted its perspective. While forest owls look down from the canopy, the snowy owl scans the horizontal plane. Its vision is uniquely adapted to the flat light conditions of the Arctic, where the sun sits low on the horizon and shadows are long and blue. Unlike many of its cousins, the snowy owl is often diurnal or crepuscular, hunting during the day as much as the night, simply because in the land of the midnight sun, there is no choice. The emotional core of the snowy owl story is tied to the cycle of the lemming. In the Arctic, life is a pulse of boom and bust. The lemming, a small, plump rodent, is the engine of the tundra. In some years, the lemmings are everywhere, and the snowy owls respond by laying large clutches of eggs, sometimes as many as 11 in a single nest. In these years of plenty, the tundra is alive with white wings. But when the lemming population crashes, as it does every few years, the owls face a grim choice: starve or move. This leads to eruptions, where thousands of snowy owls fly south, appearing in places they are rarely seen, like the beaches of New England or the fields of the Great Plains, driven by an ancient, migratory hunger. Unlike the forest owls that stay in one territory for life, the snowy owl is a nomad of the wind. It has a low fidelity to its nesting sites, choosing instead to follow the food. This nomadic lifestyle requires a different kind of intelligence, an ability to read a landscape it has never seen before and find the hidden pockets of life within it. When they nest, they do so directly on the ground, scraping a shallow bowl into the permafrost on the top of a mound. This makes them vulnerable to predators like the Arctic fox or the wolf, and the snowy owl has become one of the most aggressive defenders in the bird world. They will dive bomb a marauding fox with the force of a falling sledgehammer, their talons capable of inflicting deep, lethal wounds. As we watch a snowy owl sitting motionless on a coastal dune, its yellow eyes staring out at the gray Atlantic or the frozen Beaufort Sea, we see the ultimate expression of the owl's resilience. It is a creature of the extremes, a bird that has taken the owl blueprint and pushed it to its absolute physical limit. It reminds us that the night is not just a time of day. It is a condition of the world, a state of being that exists wherever the light is thin and the environment is harsh. The wind begins to pick up, carrying the scent of salt and the promise of a coming storm. The Arctic is a landscape of constant motion and brutal clarity. But the snowy owl is not the only hunter moving through these open spaces. In the gray hours between light and dark, it must share the world with a different cast of characters: foxes, wolves, and the smaller, flickering shadows of bats. As we leave the white expanses of the tundra, we move back toward the complexity of the global food web, exploring how the owl navigates the delicate balance of life with its fellow night hunters. The transition from the solitary majesty of the Arctic sentinel back into the crowded, whispering shadows of the temperate world reveals a complex theater of competition and cooperation. The owl does not own the night, it merely presides over it. As the moon casts its long, skeletal fingers across the forest floor, a diverse cast of night dwellers emerges from the gloom, each filling a specific niche in the grand machinery of the ecosystem. To understand the owl, one must see it not as an isolated ghost, but as a central player in a sophisticated game of niche partitioning, a biological arrangement where different species divide the resources of the dark to avoid direct conflict. In the higher reaches of the canopy, the owl's primary neighbors are the bats. While the owl is a heavy, silent bomber, the bat is a flickering, erratic fighter jet. They share the same air, yet they rarely clash. The bat focuses on the aerial plankton, the millions of moths, beetles, and gnats that fill the midnight sky, while the owl focuses on the heavier mammals below. However, the relationship is not always peaceful. In a display of intrigued predation, larger owls like the great horned or the tawny owl will occasionally snatch a low-flying bat out of the air. The owl uses its superior passive sonar to listen for the frantic fluttering of the bat's wings, turning the hunter into the hunted in a heartbeat of intercepted sound. On the forest floor, the competition becomes more grounded. Here, the owl must contend with the fox, the bobcat, and the weasel. These are the terrestrial counterparts to the owl's aerial dominance. A fox and a great horned owl may hunt the same meadow for the same population of voles, but they do so with different search parameters. The fox relies on its nose to track scent trails through the grass, while the owl relies on its ears to pinpoint movement from above. This prevents them from constantly tripping over one another. This vertical layering of the hunt ensures that the rodent population is pressured from both the earth and the sky, maintaining a rigorous check on the ecosystem's balance. The emotional tension of these encounters is most visible at the edges of the wood. When an owl and a fox meet in a moonlit clearing, there is a mutual, guarded respect. Neither is an easy meal for the other. The owl will puff its feathers, becoming a massive, hissing gargoyle to protect its kill, while the fox will circle warily, calculating the risk of those 4-inch talons. This is the ecology of fear. The presence of these top-tier predators changes the behavior of everything else. Because the owl is watching, the mice do not venture too far from cover. Because the mice stay in the cover, the vegetation is protected from overgrazing. The owl is the conductor of a symphony of caution. But the owl also faces rivals among its own kind. In many forests, multiple species of owls coexist. To avoid interspecific competition, they divide the night. The small screech owl may hunt the deep, tangled thickets where its small wings give it an advantage, while the larger great-horned owl patrols the open edges. They may even divide the clock. One species might be most active at dusk, the crepuscular hour, while another waits for the dead of night when the moon is highest. This temporal and spatial division is what allows the night forest to support such a high density of life. The role of the owl extends even to the scavenger guild. The remains of an owl's kill, the bits of meat or bone not consumed, provide a vital food source for beetles, ants, and fungi. The owl is a nutrient cycler, moving energy from the quick-moving rodents into the slow-moving soil. Even in death, the owl continues this service. Its own body, rich in calcium and minerals, eventually returns to the earth, feeding the roots of the very trees that once held its nest. As the pre-dawn chill begins to settle over the woods, the nocturnal hunters begin to retreat. The foxes return to their dens, the bats to their caves, and the owls to their hidden roosts. The balance has been maintained for another night. But this ancient rhythm, which has played out for millions of years, eventually encountered a new kind of observer. As the first humans moved through these same woods, they looked up into the golden eyes of the owl and saw something more than just a bird. They saw a mirror of their own fears, a symbol of wisdom, and a messenger from a world they could not fully understand. The air is softening, and the first light clash of the coming sun begins to gray the eastern sky. The story of the owl's biology and ecology is now intertwined with the story of the human mind. We move from the physical reality of the food web to the flickering firelight of the human past, exploring the first moments when our ancestors stood in the dark and felt the weight of a silent wing passing overhead. The transition from the raw, biological reality of the forest to the flickering theater of the human mind is a bridge made of firelight and shadow. As the first humans emerged from the safety of their caves and shelters, they did not find the night empty. They found it occupied by a presence that seemed to mock the limitations of the human form. To our ancestors, who were largely blind and vulnerable once the sun dipped below the horizon, the owl was not merely an animal. It was a supernatural anomaly. It was a creature that could navigate a void where humans stumbled, a bird that could see the invisible and hear the silent. This was the birth of a profound, complicated relationship, a mixture of deep-seated fear, spiritual respect, and a primal observation that would eventually lay the foundations for both myth and science. In the early Paleolithic, the encounter between human and owl was intimate and visceral. Imagine a group of hunters huddled around a dying fire in a limestone cavern. Outside, the wind moans through the gorge, and the darkness is a physical barrier. Suddenly, a sound pierces the air, not the growl of a cat or the howl of a wolf, but a low, rhythmic hoo-hoo that seems to vibrate through the stone itself. To those early minds, this was the voice of the night speaking. When they looked up, they saw two glowing, golden orbs fixed upon them from a high ledge. The owl's face, with its forward-facing eyes and flat, mask-like features, bore an uncanny resemblance to a human face. It was this anthropomorphic quality, this sense of a sentient, thinking presence, that first sparked the human imagination. The first evidence of this fascination is etched into the very walls of the earth. In the Chauvet Cave of France, dating back over 30,000 years, an ancient artist used a finger to trace the image of a long-eared owl into the soft moon milk of the cave wall. This is not a casual sketch. The artist depicted the bird from the back, but with its head turned a full 180 degrees to face the viewer. This demonstrates a sophisticated level of observation. Our ancestors had already noticed the owl's unique skeletal flexibility. They saw that the owl was a creature of omniscience, able to look behind itself without moving its body, a trait that humans, with our rigid necks and limited peripheral vision, could only envy. This observation led to a dualistic perception of the owl. In some cultures, the bird became a psychopomp, a guide for the souls of the dead. Because the owl moved so effortlessly between the world of light and the world of darkness, it was believed to be the only creature capable of navigating the path to the afterlife. To hear an owl near a camp was often interpreted as a message from the ancestors or a warning from the spirit realm. The silence of its flight added to this ghostly reputation. A predator that could strike without a sound was clearly operating under different laws of nature. It was a spirit warrior, a being that possessed a mana or a power that humans sought to emulate. Yet, alongside this fear was a deep, practical respect. Early humans were themselves hunters, and they recognized the owl as a master of the craft. They watched how the owl waited for the right moment, how it utilized the cover of shadows, and how it remained absolutely still. In many hunter-gatherer societies, the owl became a teacher of patience and stealth. Shamanic traditions often involve the wearing of owl feathers or the mimicry of owl calls, an attempt to bridge the sensory gap and borrow the bird's night vision. They saw the owl as the guardian of the forest's secrets, the one who kept watch while the rest of the tribe was most vulnerable. The emotional tone of these early encounters was one of numinous awe, a feeling of being in the presence of something holy and terrifying at the same time. The owl's eyes, which do not blink in the way human eyes do, suggested a state of eternal vigilance. This gave rise to the idea of the watchman. In the early agricultural settlements of the Fertile Crescent, the presence of owls near grain stores was a blessing. Though the farmers may not have understood the specifics of rodent population control, they saw the results. The birds that lived in the rafters of the granaries kept the pests away. The owl became an accidental ally, a silent partner in the dawn of human civilization. As we move from these raw, early observations into the structured societies of the ancient world, the owl's image begins to solidify into more specific symbols. It migrates from the cave wall to the coin, from the shamanic mask to the shoulder of a goddess. The bird that once haunted the dreams of the cave dweller was about to become the icon of the philosopher. The transition is a shift from the fear of the dark to the pursuit of the light of knowledge that the owl's eyes seemed to represent. The fire in the cave is fading now, replaced by the steady, clinical glow of the rising moon. The stories of the past are heavy in the air, a reminder that we have never been alone in the night. We move from the early, primal encounters into the vast landscape of folklore and mythology, where the owl's golden eyes would eventually see the rise and fall of empires, becoming a vessel for the collective wisdom and the deepest superstitions of the human race. The transition from the primal awe of the cave to the structured belief systems of early civilizations turned the owl into a living paradox. As humanity began to build cities and record its history, the owl was forced to play two conflicting roles: the bringer of death and the bearer of wisdom. In the flickering light of ancient temples and the dusty corners of medieval libraries, the bird's physical traits were reimagined as metaphors for human virtues and vices. The same golden eyes that once represented a predatory threat now became the mirrors of the soul, reflecting a world that was as much about the supernatural as it was about the biological. In the Mediterranean basin, the owl found its most enduring champion. In ancient Greece, the little owl, Athene Noctua, became the inseparable companion of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. The Greeks looked at the owl's large, unblinking eyes and saw not a predator, but a philosopher. They believed that the owl possessed an inner light that allowed it to see what was hidden from others, the truth. The owl became the mascot of Athens, stamped onto silver tetradrachm coins that were known throughout the ancient world simply as owls. Here, the bird's ability to navigate the darkness was equated with the human ability to navigate the complexities of thought and reason. However, as we move west and forward in time to the Roman Empire, the tone shifts dramatically. To the Romans, the owl was a strix, a word that eventually gave us striga, witch, and strigid, the scientific family name for owls. The Romans saw the owl as a harbinger of doom and a consumer of human flesh. Its nocturnal habits were no longer a sign of wisdom, but of a connection to the underworld. They believed that the hoot of an owl foretold the deaths of emperors, including Julius Caesar and Augustus. The owl's silent flight was reimagined as the stealth of a sorceress, and its appearance in a city was considered an omen so foul that the city would have to undergo a ritual purification. This duality followed the owl into the folklore of the Middle Ages. In Europe, the owl was often portrayed as the anti-bird, a creature that shunned the light of God for the shadows of the devil. It was frequently depicted in art being mobbed by songbirds, a behavior that actually occurs in nature, known as mobbing, but which medieval observers interpreted as the righteous birds of the day attacking the sinful bird of the night. Yet, in the same period, the owl remained a symbol of the scholar, perched on the desks of alchemists who worked by candlelight to unlock the secrets of the universe. Across the Atlantic, the indigenous cultures of the Americas developed their own profound and varied interpretations. For many, like the Apache and the Seminole, the owl was a powerful messenger of the spirit world, often associated with the transition to the afterlife. To hear an owl call your name was to receive a summons from the ancestors. Yet for the Pawnee, the owl was a protective spirit, a chief of the night that offered guidance to those who traveled after sunset. The bird's physical features, the tufts on a great horned owl or the white face of a barn owl, became the basis for elaborate masks and totems, serving as a reminder of the thin veil between the physical and the spiritual. In the East, the owl's reputation was equally complex. In some parts of India, the owl is the Vahana or vehicle of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, symbolizing the need to remain wise and vigilant even in times of prosperity. Conversely, in other traditions, it is seen as an unlucky bird that brings misfortune to a house. This global fragmentation of the owl's image shows that we have never been able to look at this bird objectively. We have always projected our own cultural anxieties and aspirations onto its feathered face. As the Age of Enlightenment began to dawn, the flickering candles of superstition were slowly replaced by the steady lamps of the scientific method. The owl was about to be reclaimed from the world of omens and returned to the world of anatomy. We move from the strix of the witch to the strigiformes of the biologist. The transition is a shedding of the supernatural skin to reveal the internal machinery that makes the bird possible. The stories of the ancients did not disappear. They simply became the foundation for a new kind of wonder, a wonder born of understanding how the owl actually does the things that once seemed like magic. The night is finally beginning to yield. In the quiet hour before the birds of the day take over the sky, we look one last time at the owl as a cultural icon. It has survived our fear and our worship, remaining unchanged by the stories we tell about it. We move now to the final stage of our journey, the modern world, where the owl faces a new kind of challenge, one that its ancient eyes could never have foreseen. The transition from the world of ancient myth to the modern landscape is a collision between an ancient biological blueprint and a rapidly changing planet. As the 21st century unfolds, the owl faces a set of challenges that its millions of years of evolution never prepared it for. The darkness, once the owl's absolute sanctuary, is being eroded by the persistent, orange glow of the human world. We are entering the era of the anthropogenic night, a time when the silent hunter must navigate a landscape of glass, steel, and invisible chemical threats. The owl's golden eyes, designed to capture the faintest starlight, are now often blinded by the glare of 1,000 artificial suns. Light pollution is perhaps the most insidious of these modern shifts. In many parts of the world, true dark no longer exists. The sky glow from cities disrupts the owl's hunting patterns and its hormonal cycles. For a bird that relies on the contrast between shadow and movement, the flattening of the light makes the forest floor a more difficult map to read. Some species, like the barn owl, find themselves drawn to the edges of highways, where the mowed grass provides easy access to rodents. But this proximity to human infrastructure comes at a high price. Vehicle strikes are now one of the leading causes of mortality for owls in developed regions. Beyond the physical obstacles of roads and buildings lies a more hidden danger: the chemical legacy of our war on pests. Because owls sit at the very top of the food chain, they are the bio-indicators of the landscape's health. When we use rodenticides to clear our barns and fields, the poison does not stop with the mouse. A single owl, consuming hundreds of poisoned rodents over a season, accumulates these toxins in its own body, a process known as bioaccumulation. These chemicals don't always kill the owl outright. Instead, they weaken its immune system, slow its reaction times, and make its eggshells thin and brittle. The owl's health is a mirror of our own environmental stewardship. When the owls begin to disappear, it is a sign that the very foundation of the ecosystem is fraying. The emotional tone of this modern scene is one of conservation urgency. However, it is not a story of despair, but one of partnership. Across the globe, the Owl Project and various citizen science initiatives are working to bridge the gap. We are seeing a return to the ancient alliance between farmers and owls. In vineyards and orchards from California to Israel, farmers are installing owl boxes, artificial nesting sites that encourage barn owls to move back onto the land. A single family of owls can provide a more effective and sustainable pest control service than any chemical spray, proving that the most advanced technology we have is often the natural systems we've spent centuries trying to replace. Technological advancements are also allowing us to see the owl's world with unprecedented clarity. Satellite tagging and thermal imaging have revealed migratory paths and social behaviors that were previously hidden in the dark. We are finally beginning to understand the hidden geography of the owl, not as a collection of static territories, but as a fluid, interconnected network of life that spans continents. This data is the new wisdom, a scientific understanding that allows us to create protected corridors and light-safe zones where the night can still be night. As the moon begins its final descent and the first pale light of dawn touches the tops of the highest pines, the owl's night work comes to an end. It returns to its roost, a silent, feathered statue blending into the bark. The owl has survived the ice ages, the rise and fall of empires, and the superstitions of 1,000 generations. It remains a master of the stillness, a reminder that there is a profound power in waiting, in listening, and in seeing what others ignore. Our journey through the night has taken us from the microscopic structure of a feather to the vast expanses of the Arctic and the deep reaches of the human heart. We have seen that the owl is more than just a predator. It is a vital organ of the living earth. As the sun rises, the ghost does not disappear. It simply waits for the light to fade once more. The story of the owl is not a closed book, but a continuous cycle, a pulse of life that will continue as long as there is a forest to guard and a night to watch over. The morning air is filled with the chorus of songbirds, and the world of the day is wide awake. But somewhere, in the deep shadow of a cedar or the hollow of a sycamore, a pair of golden eyes closes for a few hours of well-earned rest. The night will return, and when it does, the silent wings will be ready.